All right, welcome for all you awesome people out there today. So, I wanted to reintroduce myself if a lot of you are tuning in for the first time, if you're not as familiar with me, or if it's just been a while. So, my name is Jason Wright. I am a doctor of physical therapy by trade. However, I have been able to, through a series of fortunate events, transition back into my original passion of being for lack of a better term, a fitness coach. Um, as the way things have turned out, right? Starting off as a personal trainer and a health coach and more of the gym and then corporate America, it afforded me a lot of different opportunities prior to going into pursuing my physical therapy education. So I have a unique skill set in being able to understand the uh, continuum of exercise and activity across the lifespan and across the spectrum of injury, recovery, performance, peak performance, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to very uniquely and in-depth understand the way things can change and shift and be very dynamic and very fluid when it comes to humans and the human body and the movement system. So having said all that, maybe for a lack of a more marketable or fancy phrase, I essentially market myself as a men's fitness coach, right? With the ultimate goal of I help work with men who want to become a better version of themselves, right? That starts off as a physical journey. And then along the way, they realize that it's a lot more of an internal journey that must take place in order for the physical to progress and be maintained properly. So, and I help you do that without getting yourself hurt, period. Or without getting yourself re-injured from a recent or old injury that's plagued you in the past whenever you've been more active. Okay, so welcome back. So I want to talk this week about working on, okay, if an exercise hurts or if I have pain, should I still exercise or should I just stop? So people tend to fall in one of two camps. They go into the camp of, oh, that hurts, I'm done exercising. Or they go to the other extreme, I'm just going to keep pushing it because no pain, no gain. So there's some happy medium middle ground here that we need to explore today. So I wanted to give you guys some guidance, some feedback on when's the right time to keep going, when's the time that I need to stop, you know. So having said all that, I want to start off with understanding this, that generally if if it's a muscle that feels really tight, right? It feels really tight and you think that stretching is the key because when you stretch, it feels better. What that fails to do is that fails to address the underlying cause of the tension in the muscle, right? It's not always because of stress. It's not always just because the muscle's gotten tight or you lack mobility. A lot of the times, it is a result of your brain, your nervous system, trying to create stability and strength where it senses it to be lacking. So let's say, for example, you have a lot of, let's say you've got a lot of hamstring tightness, right? So you keep stretching those hammies, you can't get anywhere with it. As a physical therapist who is also a fitness coach, when it comes to prescribing exercises for somebody with a chronically tight hamstring or groin region, right? or hips, right? Just kind of, there's an umbrella term. I'm tight in the hips, I'm tight in the groin, I'm tight wherever. A lot of times there's usually one of those two muscle groups at play. And I'm focusing this particular instruction on what to do when it's the hamstrings, right? Because most people tend to have that. And a lot of us who are self-employed, we tend to sit more than we're up moving around and walking. And so the hamstrings, the hip flexors, a lot of times the abdominals and things like that. So certain muscles tend to get a lot weaker as a result of the lack of strain on them. And that's normal. But especially muscles that tend to be resting for a prolonged period in a shortened position, like the hamstrings are, right? The hamstrings originate on the pelvis, right? On the bottom of the butt bones, and they run past the knees. So they're hip extensors and primarily knee flexors, right? They act on both ends. So when the muscle gets tight from being in a shortened position for a period of time, it's common to think that stretching them makes it better. What happens though is with the hamstring specifically, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole for the sake of the video here, is that there's multiple things at play when it comes to perceived hamstring tightness. You have to rule out, with proper testing, movement testing, quality assessment, you have to rule out the involvement of the sciatic nerve as the cause of the tension. Now, what do I mean by that? Is it neural tension? Is the nerve not mobilizing well throughout its series of holes and crevices it has to pass through in order to get all the way down to innervate the foot? Or is it just the hamstring muscle? So it's key to be able to delineate between the two, because if you stretch a less mobile sciatic nerve, right, trying to make it longer, thinking that it's stretching the muscle, when it's not the muscle, it's the nerve at fault here, you're going to really make it angry, right? Like, you think you've made your mother-in-law angry before, you've not seen anything, right? So a lot of that neural tension, I call it the mother-in-law. I think I picked that up from, I can't remember which continuing ed course I was getting some credits on. Either way, I want to give credit where it's due. I can't quite cite the source. I call it the mother-in-law issue. So just because it's very easy to anger, and it's very hard to forget, because once you flare it up, once it's irritable, it takes a long time for it to calm back down. And then it likes to be irritable much faster in the future. So you have to be very careful. If you're hammering yourself with hamstring stretches and massages, thinking that it's fixing the problem, it's not. It's contributing to it. So what do you do in that case? Well, one, you get somebody that knows how to delineate between the two. Oftentimes, it's your practitioners in the physical therapy or chiropractic realm, right? Typically the movement experts, okay? Being able to understand what's going on with the body and what's causing it, not just treating the symptoms, but treating the source. Okay. So having said that, let's say it's not the sciatic nerve. Hallelujah. Praise Jesus. It's the muscle itself. Right. So what's going on there? Right. So some people get into a chicken and egg debate. They go, well, the muscle's tight, so it's weak. Well, au contraire, what if it's weak because what if it's tight because it's weak? Right. So that's something you have to consider. And that's something that when you're working with somebody that's programming for you, or maybe you're trying to DIY and you're not getting anywhere with it. Well, first of all, I want to caution you, just like I don't try to do things for myself that I'm not well trained in. Because I know better, and I don't like wasting time, and I certainly don't like wasting money, but more so time, right? You have to be careful to understand the difference between the two, and first things first, what I would do is I want to make sure that there's no, again, it's the physical therapist in me. I want to do a quality movement screening in order to discern, is this something that is a symptom of a greater problem, i.e. the lumbar spine, and it's a referral issue of how the nerve's communicating to the muscle? If so, again, refer appropriately to a physical therapist that's able to handle that or is licensed in the state where you're located. Another thing is being able to, once you rule out the spine as the creation, the problem creator there, then okay, then we're left with, and also making sure hip mobility is good, knee mobility is good, ankle mobility is good. Okay, so we've done that. Now we have to be able to discern, all right, I've got a weak muscle here. What do I need to do about it? Well, there's a good case then, if you've ruled out everything else, that you've gotten to the bottom of it and it's the muscle itself. Instead of stretching, instead of going for massages, those are passive treatments to an active problem, right? The tension in those muscles is holding back your ability to be as active as you'd like to be, work out the way you want to work out, play with your kids the way that you want to play with your kids, et cetera, et cetera. Instead of stretching, getting massages, and then just doing that nonstop, focus on strengthening, right? Get the muscle stronger. All right, so we've tackled that. Okay, now I want to shift gears into the original topic of, well, if something hurts, when should I stop? Or should I keep going? So people, like I said, people fall in their two camps. They go, okay, I knew it. Exercise is the devil. I'm done with it. Or, man, you just got to keep going, man. You just got to want it. Again, the sweet spot's somewhere in the middle. So understanding more times than not, the solution is not stopping, right? But instead modifying. How do I modify what I'm doing to still keep doing what I want to do, but in a way that's not going to keep pissing off the joints, the muscles, the nerves, whatever it is that's going on, and understanding what is it about this movement or this exercise that's giving me problems. Okay. So we have to prescribe appropriately. And I like to keep it simple, right? Most of what I try to do, I try to abide by and prescribe by the KISS method. So keep it simple, stupid. It's a matter of adjusting a few things, right? Because what few knobs and levers can we turn and pull to make the biggest impact downstream? And that is step one, modify a load, right? Perhaps it's a load tolerance problem. So back off on the amount of weight, try it again. Does that change it? Is it better? Is it worse? Or is it about the same? And if it's the same or worse, on a scale of 0 to 10, what's the pain level associated with it? What pain level or intensity is that movement creating? So a general rule of thumb is, if there's pain there, you're not necessarily making it worse unless you just fired up an acute injury. Like you've torn something, you know it as soon as you did it, you've heard the snap, crackle, or pop. Everything's been wrong since then. It's above a 6 out of 10 pain. It's probably 7 or 8 out of 10, most likely. Then, okay, that's something you need to stop, seek medical attention, get it taken care of. That's rarely the case, right? I can barely count on one hand. In fact, I've never been able to count on one hand a situation where a client has injured themselves actively during the workout or after the fact. Now, there might be some residual muscle soreness that's lingering, or maybe something that's become a little irritated, but they've not developed an injury. Okay. Usually they injure themselves doing something unrelated with their friends or with their wife or with the kids, and they thought they could do more than their body was capable of doing in that moment. They instantly felt it and they knew what they did. So, but nothing actively in the workout. So that's why I can say, like, that's very rare when that happens. But when it does happen, you know it. Now, if we're talking about something that just hurts or feels uncomfortable, right? modify the load. Now, if you can do it and it's a 6 out of 10 or below, again, no pain on the smaller end of the numerical scale. 0 is pain-free. 6, it's moderate. I need to take some Tylenol or Advil for it. It's annoying, but I can work through it. Right? 7, it's getting really intense. It's starting to get a lot more intense. Might need something heavier than a Tylenol or an Advil to take the edge off. 8, 9, and 10. 10, you're blacking out in the ER. That's how bad the 10 is. Or somebody's taking an axe to your chest. I need to stop being so animated with my hands when I've got a microphone in front of me. Somebody's taking a pickaxe to the middle of your chest. 10 out of 10 pain. It cannot get any worse than that. Right? Some people can go about their lives and think everything's fine. They don't even change their respiration rate. They're not sweating. They're not seeming in agony in any way, but hey, it's 10 out of 10. Right. So I like to use that to maybe help people clarify their subjective rating of their pain or discomfort. Right. It's not always pain. Sometimes it's just discomfort. All right. So can I do it by modifying load, right? Decreasing the weight or removing the weight if needed. And is it still that same intensity, or is it a little better? Right? Again, if it's above a 6 out of 10, hold off on it, do something different that doesn't create that kind of pain. And then investigate or follow up with your coach. Hopefully they're qualified enough to be able to discern between injury and discomfort, and then knowing what tissues and things like that are involved. There's a good chance they're not, because they're not trained physical therapists. And even though I'm not coaching people as a physical therapist, my brain can still tell you, hey, this is a problem or it's not a problem, and you need to see somebody to follow up on it. Or we can just change things and you're still fine and you actually start feeling a lot better and you don't have to stop doing anything. Or you don't have to spend money on a unnecessary image. So that's pretty cool. Either way, modify the load. How does that affect the pain? If it's better, stick with that for a little bit until your load tolerance increases. And then you can start gradually increasing weight again as appropriate, as tolerated. All right, that's 1. 2, modify the range, right? So modify how far you're going into that range of motion, right? So again, let's use the hamstring again as an example. So let's say we're talking about deadlifts, right? Or Romanian deadlifts, more specifically, because you're feeling a lot more hamstring tension in that exercise. So you keep thinking, well, it's only going to be effective if I go all the way to the floor and I pull from the floor. Not true. A deadlift can be just as effective from a raised surface, right? There's box elevated deadlifts. There are rack pulls, right? Where you're just pulling it off the rack at maybe half the range of motion, right? Modify that. That's decreasing the range. Or let's say if it's a lateral lunge, a side lunge, and you feel that adductor, that groin pain, feels really uncomfortable if you go too far. Decrease the range, right? Don't step as far. See what happens. Oh, that's better. Good. Stay there. And then over time, your tissues will adapt and you'll be able to start creeping deeper into the range, and hopefully with a greater load over time. You can't get there day 1, week 1, month 1. Sometimes it takes time for the tissues to adapt. And a lot of times when we're talking soft tissues like muscle, it's at least going to be a 6 to 8+ week process. All right. So we've modified load, we've modified range. Okay. Hold on. I'm trying to think now. What were the other things? Shoot. I think I just drew a blank, but usually it's one of those 2 things. I did have a third, and I just gave this advice to somebody earlier today. I can't think exactly what it was, because it was a knee issue, patellar tendon, bothering him a lot with squats. Oh, sorry. All right. So we modified. I'll get there, guys. I swear I'm highly educated. So We modify load, that's the weight. You can modify the range, how far you go into that exercise movement, or you can modify the movement altogether, right? So for example, in this case, lunges were problematic for that part of his knee. So we can modify several different ways from there. I know I've switched from hamstring to the knee, but please keep up. Instead of doing the traditional lunge, right? And I have a bias towards reverse lunges over forward lunges. I think that they're typically a more accessible exercise for most all people to be able to do, that still tax all the muscles you need taxed in joints in the ways that are healthier and not as problematic for flaring up old aches or pains, right? But this was an injury that's a good 20 years old. There's a lot of neglect that's occurred over the years because, hey, if it hurts, don't do it, right? Just do upper body. That was his quote to me. And as a result, the tissues have not been able to appropriately adapt and build themselves back up after that old surgery. So we made some modifications. So for example, we went into like a split stance squat. And instead of doing a dynamic step back or step forward type of lunge, we just, hey, one foot in front of the other, hold on to something for support if you need it. You're just going to squat down and back up. So we're still targeting the same muscle groups that we would be targeting in the other original setup, but it's something that's going to be more friendly and less threatening on his tissues and his nervous system to think, hey, I'm getting a signal here. That's weird. The brain interprets it. Oh, ouch, that's pain. Don't know why. There's no damage there. The injury's 20 years ago, but we know that something's off. It's something we're not ready for. So we're going to say, ow, until we figure out what's going on, or until you have a chance to figure out what's going on. Right. So that's what we did. Made some other adjustments too. I did like a little video assessment. I had him send me some video of him doing 2 movements, help me really tease out, okay, it's not the ankle, not necessarily anything from the back or the hip, but we are going to address some strength deficits there. So I'm added in some accessory work into his program to be able to help build up everything that creates the stability above the knee. So that way, by the time the forces get to the knee, they can focus on just getting stronger and not necessarily, all right, we're not ready for this. There's shearing that's occurring in here and it's irritating, right? We don't want that. So there are ways to continue to work out in the presence of pain. You just have to identify what's the intensity of the pain, what's causing it, first of all, and what's not causing it. That's just as important a question. The next thing is, what's the actual root here? Okay. And from there, what needs to be modified to help address that root issue? Right? Do we need to modify how much weight we're doing? Do we need to modify how far we're going into that range? Or do we need to modify the movement itself in order to avoid stopping, but without creating more irritation in that particular body part? So in a nutshell, that's how I keep people exercising without worrying about injury or injuring themselves further. So guys, thank you all so much for your time. I hope that you're able to join us for the next video.